the day Delilah Jenkins told herself she would never love again. The sky over Walla Walla, Washington Territory, turned the color of bruised plums, as if the heavens themselves mourned alongside her broken heart. It was September of 1878, and she stood beside a fresh grave with dirt still clinging to her black dress. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The preacher's words had faded into meaningless noise, and now only the wind spoke, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the distant promise of rain. At 23 years old, Delilah had already buried a husband who had promised her forever, but delivered only 8 months before a stampede took him away. She had loved Thomas with everything she had, and now that he was gone, she felt certain there was nothing left inside her chest but an empty cavern where her heart used to be. The mourners dispersed slowly, offering sympathetic touches to her shoulder and murmured condolences that meant nothing. Her sister Martha wanted her to come stay at the family homestead, but Delilah refused. She had the small house Thomas had built for her on the edge of town, and she would stay there, alone with her grief and her certainty that love was a fool's game she would never play again. What was the point of opening your heart when life could snatch away everything you held dear in an instant? Better to wall yourself off, to become stone, to never again feel the crushing weight of loss. 3 months passed in a blur of gray days and sleepless nights. Delilah took in sewing to support herself, her needle flying through fabric with mechanical precision while her mind remained carefully blank. The women of Walla Walla brought her their mending and their dresses to altar, and they tried to draw her into conversation, but she gave them only polite monosyllables. She went to church on Sundays because not going would cause talk, but she felt nothing during the services except a vague impatience for them to end. She bought her supplies at the general store, speaking only when necessary. She had become a ghost in her own life, and she told herself this was safer, better, the only way to survive. December brought snow to the Washington Territory, transforming Walla Walla into a landscape of white and gray. Delilah was walking back from the general store one afternoon, her arms full of supplies, when she slipped on a patch of ice hidden beneath fresh snow. She would have fallen hard if not for the strong hands that caught her, steadying her with a firm but gentle grip. She looked up into a pair of startling green eyes set in a weathered, handsome face she had never seen before. "Careful there, madam," the stranger said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. "That ice is treacherous." For a moment, Delilah could not speak. The stranger's hands were still on her arms, and through the fabric of her coat, she could feel their warmth. It was the strangest thing. That warmth seemed to spread through her entire body, thawing something she thought had frozen solid. She jerked away as if burned, her packages tumbling into the snow. "I am perfectly fine," she said sharply, more sharply than she intended. She knelt to gather her scattered purchases, her cheeks burning despite the cold. The stranger knelt beside her, helping to collect her things. "Did not mean to overstep, madam. Just wanted to help." "I do not need help," Delilah said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew how ungracious they sounded. This man had kept her from a nasty fall, and here she was snapping at him like a wounded animal. She forced herself to meet his eyes again. "But I thank you for your assistance." He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. "Name is Pierce Nathanson. I just arrived in town yesterday, bought the old Henderson ranch outside of town." "Mrs. Jenkins," Delilah said stiffly, making certain he heard the missus. She gathered the last of her packages and stood. "Welcome to Walla Walla, Mr. Nathanson. Good day." She hurried away before he could respond, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with her near fall. When she reached the safety of her small house, she set her packages on the kitchen table and pressed her hands to her hot cheeks. What was wrong with her? The man had simply kept her from falling. There was no reason for her to react so strongly. But she could still feel the warmth of his hands on her arms, could still see those impossibly green eyes looking at her with concern and something else, something she refused to name. She threw herself into her sewing with renewed determination, staying up late into the night to finish a dress for the banker's wife. She would not think about Pierce Nathanson. She would not wonder what had brought him to Walla Walla or why he had bought the Henderson Ranch. She certainly would not recall the way his smile had made something flutter in her chest. She had sworn off love, sworn off men, sworn off everything except survival. One stranger with kind eyes was not going to change that. But Walla Walla was a small town, and it seemed impossible to avoid Pierce Nathanson. She saw him at church the following Sunday, sitting in the back pew in clothes that were clearly new and not yet broken in. She saw him at the general store, buying supplies for his ranch. She saw him on the street, tipping his hat to her with that devastating smile. Each time she nodded politely and moved on, but each time she felt that strange warmth spreading through her chest, and each time it frightened her more. January arrived with bitter cold and howling winds. Delilah was running low on firewood one evening when there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Pierce Nathanson standing on her porch, his wagon loaded with split logs. "Mr. Nathanson," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "What are you doing here, Mrs. Jenkins? I was delivering wood to some folks in town, and I noticed your woodpile was looking mighty low. Thought you might need some before the next storm hits." He gestured to his wagon. "No charge, madam, just being neighborly." Delilah's first instinct was to refuse. She did not want to owe this man anything. But the practical part of her brain noted that her woodpile truly was dangerously low, and the wind was already picking up, promising another brutal night. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Nathanson. If you will tell me the price, I will pay you for your trouble." "No trouble and no price," Pierce said firmly. "Just let me stack it for you and I will be on my way." Before she could protest further, he was already unloading the wood. Delilah stood in her doorway, wrapped in her shawl, watching as he worked. He moved with an easy grace despite the heavy logs, and she found herself noticing the breadth of his shoulders, the strength in his arms. When he finished, he was breathing a bit harder, his breath misting in the frigid air. "There," he said, dusting off his hands. "That should last you a good while." "I insist on paying you," Delilah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Pierce shook his head. "No payment needed, Mrs. Jenkins, but I would not say no to a cup of coffee if you have any made. It is cold enough out here to freeze a man solid. It would be rude to refuse such a simple request, especially after he had just done her such a kindness." Delilah hesitated only a moment before stepping back. "Come in, then. I will make a fresh pot." Her small kitchen seemed to shrink with Pierce in it. He was not an overly large man, but his presence filled the space in a way that made Delilah acutely aware of how long it had been since she had entertained anyone. She busied herself with the coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. "You have a nice home," Pierce said, looking around. "Did you do all that needlework yourself?" Delilah glanced at the samplers and embroidered pieces that decorated her walls. Most of them she had made before her marriage, in those hopeful days when she had dreamed of filling a home with beauty. "Yes," she said shortly, "you are very talented." Pierce accepted the cup of coffee she handed him, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange, that warmth again spreading up her arm. "I have been meaning to ask around town about someone who could do some sewing for me," I need curtains for the ranch house, and my skills with a needle are sorely lacking. It was a job, and Delilah needed the work. Still, something made her hesitate. Working for Pierce Nathanson would mean more contact with him, more opportunities for these strange reactions she kept having. But she could not afford to turn down paying work out of some vague fear. I do take commissions, she said carefully. I would need to see the windows to measure them properly. Could you come out to the ranch tomorrow? I could fetch you in the wagon if you need transportation. Delilah shook her head quickly. I have my own buggy. I can drive myself. The last thing she needed was to be trapped in a wagon with him. Tomorrow afternoon, then. Pierce's green eyes held hers, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through all her careful walls. Tomorrow afternoon, she agreed. After he left, Delilah sat at her kitchen table, her own coffee growing cold in her hands. What was she doing? She should have refused the job, should have recommended another seamstress in town. But even as she thought this, she knew she would go to the Henderson ranch tomorrow. Some part of her, a part she had tried to bury alongside Thomas, wanted to see Pierce Nathanson again. The drive to the ranch took nearly an hour. The Henderson place sat in a valley surrounded by rolling hills, with the Blue Mountains visible in the distance. It was beautiful country, and Delilah felt something in her chest loosen slightly as she took in the vista. She had barely left her house in months except for necessary errands. She had forgotten how vast and lovely the world could be. Pierce was waiting for her when she arrived, and he helped her down from the buggy with the same gentle strength he had shown when catching her on the ice. "Welcome to my humble ranch," he said with a grin. "It is not much yet, but I have plans." The ranch house was sturdy but plain, clearly built by practical men more concerned with function than beauty. Inside it was sparse, with only the most basic furniture. But the bones were good, and Delilah could see the potential in it. "I am afraid I have not had much time to make it a proper home," Pierce said, a note of apology in his voice. "Been focused on getting the ranch operations running, but I figured curtains would be a good start." Delilah moved through the rooms, measuring the windows and making notes in the small book she had brought. There were 8 windows in total, which would be a substantial job. "What kind of fabric did you have in mind?" "I will leave that to your judgment," Pierce said. "I trust your taste." They discussed colors and fabrics, and Delilah found herself relaxing despite her best intentions. Pierce was easy to talk to, asking intelligent questions and actually listening to her answers. When they had finished with the measurements, he offered her lunch. "I am not much of a cook," he admitted, "but I can manage bacon and eggs without burning them." Delilah knew she should refuse and head straight back to town. Instead, she found herself saying, "I could help. I make a decent biscuit." They worked together in the kitchen, and it felt strangely natural. Pierce told her about growing up in Oregon, about working on various ranches before saving enough to buy his own place. He had been engaged once, he said, to a girl back in Portland, but she had decided ranch life was not for her and had broken things off 2 years ago. "Probably for the best," he said, flipping bacon in the pan. If she could not handle the idea of ranch life, she definitely could not have handled the reality of it. "You do not sound heartbroken," Delilah observed, cutting butter into her biscuit dough. Pierce was quiet for a moment. "I was, at the time. Thought I would never get over her, but I did." "Hearts are more resilient than we think sometimes." Delilah stiffened. "Not always." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his voice was gentle when he spoke. "I heard about your husband. I am truly sorry for your loss, Mrs. Jenkins." "It was nearly 4 months ago," Delilah said, her voice flat. She focused on shaping her biscuits, avoiding his gaze. Grief does not follow a schedule. Something about the kindness in his voice made tears prick at Delilah's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this man. She would not show weakness. "The biscuits need to bake," she said abruptly, moving toward the stove. Pierce did not push, for which she was grateful. They ate their lunch, making small talk about the town and the ranch, carefully avoiding anything too personal. But when it was time for Delilah to leave, Pierce walked her to her buggy, and as he helped her up, his hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming today," he said, "and for the biscuits. They were the best thing I have eaten since I moved here." Delilah allowed herself a small smile. "I will have the curtains ready in a few weeks. I will send word when they are finished." "Or I could check on the progress," Pierce suggested. "Maybe next week. I could take you to dinner at the hotel." "That is not necessary, Mr. Nathanson." "No," he agreed, "but I would like to, if you would permit me." Delilah knew what he was asking. This was not about curtains or checking on progress. This was about courting, about interest, about the possibility of something more. Every instinct told her to refuse, to retreat to her safe, cold solitude. But looking into Pierce's green eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand still on hers, she found herself wavering. "Just dinner," she heard herself say. "Nothing more." Pierce's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Just dinner," he agreed. As Delilah drove back to town, her mind was a whirl of confusion. What had she just done? She had sworn she would never open her heart again, and yet here she was, agreeing to have dinner with Pierce Nathanson. She told herself it meant nothing, that it was just a meal, that she was not betraying Thomas's memory. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She knew that when Pierce had touched her hand, she had felt something she thought was dead, and that terrified her more than anything. The week passed slowly. Delilah threw herself into making the curtains, choosing a deep blue fabric that would complement the ranch house nicely. She told herself she was just doing good work for a client, but she caught herself being extra meticulous, making sure every stitch was perfect. When Pierce came to call on Saturday evening to take her to dinner, she had changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple gray gown that she told herself was not meant to impress anyone. The hotel dining room was the finest establishment in Walla Walla, which was not saying much, but the food was good and the atmosphere pleasant. Pierce was freshly shaved and wearing his best suit, and Delilah had to admit he looked handsome. They sat at a corner table and Pierce ordered steak for both of them. "Tell me about your sewing," Pierce said after the waitress had left. "How did you learn?" It was a safe topic, and Delilah relaxed slightly. She told him about learning from her mother, about how she had always loved creating beautiful things with her hands. Pierce listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making observations that showed he was actually paying attention. It was refreshing, being listened to so intently. "You must miss your husband terribly," Pierce said gently as they waited for their food. Delilah's hands tightened on her napkin. "I do not wish to discuss Thomas. I understand. But Delilah, if I may call you that, I want you to know that I am not trying to replace him or make you forget him. I just enjoy your company and would like to know you better." The use of her first name sent a little thrill through her that she tried to suppress. "Mr. Nathanson, I need to be honest with you. I am not looking for anything. I cannot love again. My heart is not capable of it anymore." Pierce reached across the table and gently took her hand. The touch sent that now familiar warmth racing through her. "Your heart is more capable than you think," he said softly. "I can see it in your eyes, in the way you talk about your work, in the care you put into everything you do. You are not dead inside, Delilah, no matter how much you might wish you were." Delilah pulled her hand back, her breathing unsteady. "You do not know anything about me." "Then let me learn," Pierce said. "Let me spend time with you. No expectations, no demands." Just two people getting to know each other. The food arrived then, saving Delilah from having to respond. They ate in silence for a few minutes, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. Delilah found herself thinking about what Pierce had said. Was he right? Was she not as dead inside as she thought? The fact that she could feel anything at all when he touched her suggested he might be. "Tell me about the ranch," she said finally, deciding to steer the conversation to safer waters. "What are your plans for it?" Pierce's face lit up as he talked about his vision for the ranch, about breeding quality horses and maybe eventually cattle. His passion was evident in every word, and Delilah found herself drawn in despite herself. Here was a man who had dreams, who believed in the future, who was not afraid to work hard for what he wanted. It was impossible not to admire that. After dinner, Pierce drove her home in his wagon. The night was cold but clear, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. They talked about everything and nothing, and Delilah realized she was enjoying herself more than she had in months. When they reached her house, Pierce helped her down, his hand steady on her waist. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "I know it was not easy for you to say yes." "Thank you for dinner," Delilah replied. She hesitated, then added, "It was nice. I enjoyed it." Pierce's smile was gentle. "Can I see you again, maybe next Sunday after church?" Delilah knew she should say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she was playing with fire, that she was opening herself up to hurt again. But standing there in the starlight, looking up into Pierce's kind eyes, she found she could not refuse. "Yes," she whispered. "You can see me again." Pierce did not try to kiss her, for which Delilah was grateful. He simply tipped his hat, wished her good night, and drove away. Delilah stood on her porch for a long time after he had gone, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was beating far too fast. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Pierce would call on Delilah several times a week, sometimes taking her to dinner, sometimes just sitting with her in her parlor talking. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. Slowly, carefully, Delilah felt her walls beginning to crumble. She finished the curtains and delivered them to the ranch. Pierce insisted she stay while he hung them, and she had to admit they looked perfect. The deep blue transformed the plain rooms, making them feel warmer and more homelike. "You have a gift," Pierce said, standing back to admire her work. "You have made this house feel like a home." "It just needed a woman's touch," Delilah said without thinking, then blushed when she realized what she had implied. Pierce looked at her steadily. "Yes," he said quietly, "it does." February brought a thaw, and with it, the first hints that spring might eventually arrive. Pierce took Delilah for a ride one Sunday afternoon, showing her the furthest reaches of his ranch. They stopped at a spot overlooking a creek, and Pierce spread a blanket so they could sit and enjoy the view. "Delilah," Pierce said, taking her hand, "these past weeks have been the happiest I have had in a long time. I need you to know that my feelings for you are serious. I am falling in love with you." Delilah's heart stopped. She had known this was coming, had felt it building between them, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. "Pierce, I told you I cannot love again." "Cannot or will not?" Pierce asked gently. "There is a difference." Delilah pulled her hand away and stood, moving to the edge of the overlook. "You do not understand. When Thomas died, it broke something in me. I cannot go through that again. I cannot love someone and lose them. It is too much." Pierce came to stand beside her. "Life is full of risks, Delilah. Every time we open our hearts, we risk getting hurt. But the alternative is shutting ourselves off from everything good and beautiful in life. Is that really how you want to live?" "It is safe," Delilah whispered. "It is not living," Pierce countered. He turned her gently to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Delilah, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and what she saw there took her breath away. There was love in those green depths, pure and true and absolutely terrifying. "I love you," Pierce said. "I know you are scared. I know you think you cannot love again. But Delilah, you already do. I can see it in your eyes when you look at me. I can feel it in the way you touch my hand. You are already in love with me. You are just too afraid to admit it." "No," Delilah said, but her voice shook. "I am not. I cannot be." Pierce reached up and gently cupped her face. "Let me prove you wrong," he said softly. "Just one touch, Delilah, one real touch. If you feel nothing, I will walk away and never bother you again. But if you feel what I think you feel, then you have to be honest with yourself." Delilah should have stepped back, should have said no, should have protected herself. But she was frozen, caught in Pierce's gaze, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Pierce leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When his lips touched hers, it was gentle, almost reverent. And in that moment, Delilah felt everything she had been denying, everything she had been running from, everything she had convinced herself was dead. Her heart, that poor broken thing she thought would never work again, suddenly came roaring back to life. She felt warmth flooding through her entire body, felt hope and joy and terror and love, so much love it was overwhelming. She gasped against his lips, and Pierce pulled back, looking at her with an expression that was part triumph, part tenderness. "You feel it, do not you?" he said. "You feel it too." Tears were streaming down Delilah's face, and she did not even know when she had started crying. "I am so scared," she whispered. "I know." Pierce gathered her into his arms, and she let him, pressing her face against his chest. "I am scared too. But Delilah, I would rather have one day of truly loving you than a lifetime of safety without you." Delilah clung to him, her body shaking with the force of her emotions. Everything she had built, all her careful walls, had crumbled with just that one touch. Pierce had been right. She was in love with him, had probably been falling for him since that first day when he caught her on the ice. She had been lying to herself, hiding from the truth, but there was no hiding anymore. "I do not know how to do this," she said against his chest. "I do not know how to love again without being terrified every moment that I will lose you." Pierce pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We learn together. We take it one day at a time, and we trust that whatever time we have together, whether it is 50 years or 50 days, it will be worth it." Delilah pulled back to look at him, searching his face. "You really love me, even though I am broken. Even though I am damaged and scared and difficult." "You are not broken," Pierce said firmly. "You are wounded, and that is different. Wounds heal, Delilah. And yes, I love you. I love your strength and your courage. I love the way you care so much about your work. I love the way you try so hard to protect yourself. I love all of you, even the scared parts." Fresh tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered, and saying the words aloud was like breaking free from chains she had worn for so long. "I love you, Pierce. I am terrified, but I love you." Pierce kissed her again, and this time Delilah kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and love into it. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "What happens now?" Delilah asked. "Now," Pierce said, smiling, "we build a life together. If you will have me, Delilah Jenkins, I would like to court you properly, and when you are ready, I would like to marry you and make you my wife." Delilah laughed, the sound surprised and joyful. "Are you proposing to me?" "Not yet," Pierce said. "When I propose, it will be proper, with a ring and everything. But I want you to know my intentions are serious. I want a future with you, Delilah. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build this ranch with you and maybe, if you want, fill that big house with children. I want everything with you. It should have been too much, too fast. But somehow it felt exactly right. I want that too, Delilah said. It scares me, but I want it. Then we will be scared together, Pierce said. They stayed at the overlook until the sun began to set, talking about their hopes and fears and dreams. Delilah told Pierce about Thomas, about the good times and the pain of losing him. Pierce listened without judgment, holding her hand and offering comfort when the memories became too painful. I will never try to replace him, Pierce said. He was your first love, and he will always have a place in your heart. I am not asking you to forget him. I am just asking you to make room for me too. There is already room for you, Delilah said softly. You have made your own place in my heart, Pierce, not in Thomas's place, but beside it. Is that wrong? No, Pierce said, kissing her hand. It is exactly right. Love does not subtract, Delilah. It multiplies. You can honor Thomas's memory and still love me. The two are not mutually exclusive. As Pierce drove her home that evening, Delilah felt lighter than she had in months. The fear was still there, lurking in the background, but it was no longer overwhelming. She had been so certain that she could never love again, that her heart was too broken to heal. But Pierce had proven her wrong with just one touch. He had shown her that she was capable of love, of hope, of happiness. And while that was terrifying, it was also wonderful. The next weeks were a whirlwind of joy and discovery. Pierce courted Delilah properly, bringing her flowers and taking her on picnics and buggy rides. He introduced her to his plans for the ranch, asking for her input and making her feel like a partner rather than just an accessory. Delilah found herself blooming under his attention, coming back to life in ways she had thought impossible. The town noticed, of course. In a place as small as Walla Walla, nothing went unnoticed. Some people were happy for her, glad to see the sad young widow finding joy again. Others whispered that it was too soon, that she was disrespecting Thomas's memory. Delilah heard the gossip and it stung, but Pierce helped her ignore it. The only people whose opinions matter are yours and mine, he said. Everyone else can mind their own business. In March, Pierce took Delilah to the ranch for dinner. He had been practicing his cooking, and while he was still not skilled, the meal was edible and made with love. After they ate, he took her out to the porch and pointed up at the stars. My mother used to tell me that the stars were the souls of people who had loved so much in life that they could not stop shining even after death, Pierce said. I like to think that the people we have loved and lost are up there, watching over us, wanting us to be happy. Delilah looked up at the glittering sky. Do you really believe that? I do, Pierce said. And I think Thomas is up there right now, glad that you have found someone to love again. He would not want you to spend the rest of your life alone and sad. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. How can you be so sure? Because if I loved you and died, I would want the same thing for you. I would want you to find happiness, to find love, to live a full and beautiful life. Love is not selfish, Delilah. Real love wants what is best for the beloved, even if we are not here to see it. Pierce pulled a small box from his pocket and got down on one knee. Delilah's hands flew to her mouth, her heart racing. Delilah Jenkins, Pierce said, his voice steady and sure, you have brought light back into my life. You have shown me what it means to love someone with your whole heart. I know you were scared, and I know you thought you could never love again, but you proved yourself wrong. You are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not elaborate, but it was perfect. Delilah looked at the ring, then at Pierce, then up at the stars. She thought about Thomas, about the love they had shared, and she felt certain somehow that he would approve. She thought about her own fear, about how close she had come to shutting herself off from life forever. And she thought about Pierce, about his patience and kindness and unwavering love. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Pierce, I will marry you." Pierce stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "I love you," Pierce said. "I love you so much, Delilah." "I love you too," Delilah replied. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me that my heart could heal." "Thank you for being brave enough to try," Pierce said. They were married in April in the same church where Delilah had married Thomas. It should have felt wrong, but it did not. It felt like a new beginning, a second chance at happiness. Delilah wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Pierce wore his best suit. The church was full of well-wishers, and if there were still some who disapproved, they kept their opinions to themselves. Martha, Delilah's sister, stood up as her attendant, tears streaming down her face throughout the ceremony. "I am so happy for you," she whispered to Delilah before they walked down the aisle. "Thomas would be happy too, I am certain of it." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. When the preacher asked if Pierce would take Delilah as his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong. When Delilah said her own vows, her voice was steady, free of the fear that had plagued her for so long. This was right. This was good. This was the future she had thought she could never have. They moved into the ranch house together, and Delilah set about making it a true home. She sewed curtains for the remaining windows, hooked rugs for the floors, and filled the rooms with the small touches that transformed a house into a sanctuary. Pierce worked the ranch from sunup to sundown, but he always made time for Delilah, always made her feel cherished and loved. Their first months of marriage were blissful. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, discovered how to work together and support each other. Delilah helped with the ranch work when she could, and Pierce helped with household chores when time permitted. They were partners in every sense of the word, building a life together brick by brick. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk, or Pierce would read aloud while Delilah sewed. Sometimes they would simply sit in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. Delilah marveled at how natural it all felt, how right. She had thought loving again would be complicated and fraught with guilt, but it was not. It was as easy as breathing. Summer brought its own challenges. A drought threatened the ranch's water supply, and Pierce worked himself to exhaustion digging a new well. Delilah stood by his side, bringing him water and food, tending his blistered hands, encouraging him when he wanted to give up. When they finally struck water, they celebrated by dancing in the mud, laughing like children. "We can survive anything together," Pierce said, kissing her muddy face. "You and me, Delilah, we are a team." In August, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She was both elated and terrified. She had wanted children with Thomas, but that dream had died with him. Now here was a second chance, but with it came new fears. What if something went wrong? What if she lost the baby? What if she lost Pierce? She told Pierce her news one evening after dinner, her hands shaking as she spoke. Pierce's face transformed with joy, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Delilah, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Delilah asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Pierce said. "I am over the moon, I am ecstatic, I am the luckiest man alive." But then he saw the worry in her eyes and his expression softened. "But you are scared," he said gently. "Tell me what you are feeling." Delilah's fears came pouring out. Pierce listened to all of them, holding her close, reassuring her without dismissing her concerns. "I am scared too," he admitted. "Becoming a parent is terrifying, but we will face it together, just like we face everything. And Delilah, whether we have a dozen children or just this one, whether they all outlive us or whether we face heartbreak, We will do it together. You are not alone anymore." His words soothed something deep inside Delilah. She was not alone. She had Pierce and he had her, and together they could face whatever came. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Delilah continued her sewing work for as long as she was able, and Pierce fussed over her like a mother hen, insisting she rest more and work less. Martha visited often, helping with the heavier household chores and sharing her own experiences with motherhood. The women of Walla Walla, even those who had initially disapproved of Delilah remarrying so quickly, came bearing gifts and advice. In the quiet moments, Delilah sometimes thought about Thomas and wondered what he would think of all this. She liked to believe Pierce was right, that Thomas would be glad she had found happiness again. She no longer felt guilty for loving Pierce. Her love for Thomas had been real and true, and it still lived in her heart. But her love for Pierce was equally real and true. The two did not cancel each other out. They coexisted, proof that the human heart was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. Winter came again, and with it, the baby. Delilah's labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following afternoon. Pierce stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement and love. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Delilah wept with relief and joy. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the baby in Delilah's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Pierce looked at his son with such love and awe that Delilah felt her heart might burst. "He is perfect," Pierce whispered. "Delilah, you are amazing. He is perfect." They named him Thomas Pierce Nathanson, honoring both Delilah's past and their present. When Martha visited a few days later, she cried at the baby's name. "That is beautiful," she said. "Thomas would be so honored." "He is a part of our story," Delilah said, cradling her son. "He always will be. And I want our son to know about him, to know that it is possible to love deeply and survive loss and find joy again." Young Thomas was a good baby, happy and healthy. Pierce proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. Delilah watched her husband become a father and fell even more deeply in love with him. As their son grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Pierce's hard work paid off, and they began to earn a reputation for breeding quality horses. They hired help to manage the growing herd, and the ranch house rang with the sounds of life and laughter. On their second anniversary, Pierce surprised Delilah with a new buggy, painted a deep blue to match the curtains she had made for their home. "For the woman who brought color back into my life," he said. Delilah surprised him by announcing she was pregnant again. This time there was less fear and more joy. They knew what to expect, knew they could handle whatever came. Their daughter arrived in the spring of 1882, and they named her Sarah Rose. She had her father's green eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was as different from her brother as night from day. Where Thomas was calm and observant, Sarah was energetic and demanding. Together, they filled the ranch house with noise and chaos and boundless love. The years rolled by in a happy blur. Delilah could scarcely believe this was her life, that she had gone from the broken widow who thought she could never love again to this woman surrounded by family and joy. There were hard times, of course. Summers when the heat killed crops, winters when illness threatened, moments of worry and fear. But Pierce was always there, steady as a rock, reminding her that they could weather any storm together. When Thomas was 5 and Sarah 3, Delilah took them to visit the cemetery where her first husband was buried. She had not been there in years, afraid of what feelings it might stir up. But she felt it was important for her children to see, to understand their family's history. She stood at Thomas's grave, her son's hand in hers, her daughter on her hip, and she spoke to the man she had loved first. "I kept my promise to you," she said softly. "I survived, and I found happiness again just like you would have wanted. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for showing me what it meant to open my heart. Because of you, I was able to love again." Pierce, who had hung back to give her privacy, came to stand beside her then. He put his arm around her shoulders and Delilah leaned into him. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Delilah said, and she meant it. "I am saying goodbye, not forgetting, but saying goodbye to the grief. Is that all right?" "More than all right," Pierce said. He knelt beside young Thomas and Sarah. "This is your mother's first husband. His name was Thomas, and he loved your mother very much. We honor his memory by living good lives and loving each other." "Like you love Mama?" young Thomas asked. "Exactly like that," Pierce said. As they drove home that afternoon, Delilah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She was not the broken widow anymore. She was Pierce's wife, Thomas and Sarah's mother, a rancher's partner, a seamstress, a survivor. She was whole. More years passed. The ranch continued to grow, and so did their family. Another son, William, arrived in 1884, followed by twin daughters, Emma and Grace, in 1886. The ranch house that had once seemed so large was now filled to bursting with children and noise and life. Delilah sometimes thought back to that day on the ice when Pierce had caught her, when his touch had first stirred something she thought was dead. She had been so certain she could never love again. She had built walls so high she thought nothing could breach them. But Pierce had been patient and persistent, and he had proven her wrong in the most beautiful way possible. "What are you thinking about?" Pierce asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Gray was starting to thread through Pierce's dark hair, and there were lines around his eyes from years of sun and laughter. "I was thinking about how wrong I was," Delilah said. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after years of practice. "I was so sure I could never love again. I was so certain my heart was broken beyond repair, but you showed me I was wrong." "You showed yourself," Pierce said. "I just gave you a reason to try. You did all the hard work, Delilah. You faced your fear and chose to live again. That took courage I am not sure I could have mustered." "We gave each other courage," Delilah said. "That is what love does, is it not? It makes us braver than we knew we could be." Pierce kissed her hand. "I love you, Delilah Nathanson. I loved you that first day on the ice, even though I did not know it yet. I loved you when you tried to push me away. I loved you when you finally let me in. And I will love you for every day I have left on this earth." "And I love you," Delilah said. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for showing me that a heart can break and heal and love again." Their oldest son, Thomas, came running up to the porch then, his siblings close behind. "Papa, Mama, come play with us." Pierce stood and pulled Delilah to her feet. "Shall we?" Delilah laughed and let him pull her into the yard, where their children swarmed around them. This was her life now, this beautiful chaos, this abundance of love. She had thought she could never have this, thought her chance at happiness had died with Thomas. But she had been wrong, wonderfully wrong. As the sun set over the blue mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Delilah looked around at her family and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Life was not safe. Love was not safe. There were no guarantees, no promises that heartbreak would not come again. But that was all right. Because the alternative, the life of solitude and fear she had almost chosen, was not really living at all. Pierce caught her eye across the yard and smiled, and Delilah smiled back. They had built this life together, brick by brick, day by day, touch by touch. And it had all started with one touch, one moment when Pierce had caught her on the ice and proven her wrong about everything she thought she knew about her own heart. Years continued to pass, and the Nathanson family became a fixture in Walla Walla. Their children grew, each one developing their own personality and dreams. Young Thomas showed an aptitude for ranching and worked alongside his father from an early age. Sarah had inherited her mother's skill with a needle and spent hours creating beautiful things. William loved books and learning, and Pierce and Delilah scrimped and saved to send him to school in Portland. The twins, Emma and Grace, were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. The ranch prospered beyond Pierce's wildest dreams. His horses were sought after throughout Washington Territory and beyond. Delilah continued her sewing business, taking commissions from wealthy families, and using the money to improve the ranch and provide for their children's education. In 1889, Washington became a state, and Walla Walla celebrated with parades and parties. Pierce and Delilah attended with their children, proud to be part of this new chapter in their territory's history. Standing in the crowd, watching the celebrations, Delilah thought about how far she had come from that grief-stricken widow who thought her life was over. "Mama," Sarah said, tugging on her sleeve. "Are you crying?" Delilah touched her cheek and realized tears were indeed streaming down her face. "Happy tears, sweetheart, just happy tears." Pierce put his arm around her and pulled her close. He did not need to ask what she was feeling. After more than a decade together, they could read each other without words. As their children grew into adults, Pierce and Delilah entered a new phase of their life. One by one, the children left home to pursue their own dreams. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations, eventually bringing home a wife of his own. Sarah married a banker from town and set up a successful dressmaking business. William became a teacher, Emma married a blacksmith, and Grace, ever the adventurer, moved to Seattle to work in a bookshop. The house, so full for so many years, grew quiet. But it was a peaceful quiet, not the lonely silence Delilah had known after Thomas's death. She and Pierce had each other, and they had built a life rich with memories and love. On their 20th anniversary, Pierce took Delilah back to the spot overlooking the creek where he had first proposed. They were older now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the passage of time. But when Pierce looked at Delilah, his eyes held the same love they had held 2 decades ago. "You remember what I told you here?" Pierce asked, taking her hand. "You told me a lot of things," Delilah said with a smile. "You would have to be more specific." "I told you that I would rather have one day of truly loving you than a lifetime of safety without you," Pierce said. "And Delilah, I have had 20 years of loving you, and it has been better than anything I could have imagined. You are my greatest blessing, my truest love, my best friend." "And you are mine," Delilah said. "Pierce, I was so broken when we met. I thought I could never love again, thought my heart was too damaged. But you saw something in me I could not see in myself. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself, and you gave me this beautiful life." "We gave each other this life," Pierce corrected gently. "It was not just me, Delilah. You were brave enough to try again, brave enough to risk your heart. That is what made all the difference." They stood together, looking out over land they had worked for decades, and Delilah felt a completeness she had never experienced before. Her life had not been easy. She had known loss and pain and grief, but she had also known love, deep and true and transformative. And in the end, that was what mattered. More years passed. They became grandparents, delighting in their children's children. Pierce's hair went from gray to white, and his back developed a permanent stoop from years of ranch work. Delilah's hands, once so deft with a needle, began to ache with arthritis. But they were together, and that made all the hardships bearable. In 1898, Pierce fell ill. The doctor said it was his heart, weakened by years of hard labor. There was nothing to be done except make him comfortable. Delilah moved Pierce's bed to the parlor so he could look out the window at the land he loved. She sat with him for hours, holding his hand, talking about their life together. "I am not afraid," Pierce told her one afternoon. "I have lived a good life, Delilah. I have loved you and been loved by you. I have seen my children grow and prosper. I have no regrets." Delilah tried to be brave, but the thought of losing Pierce was almost unbearable. "I do not know how to do this again," she whispered. "I do not know how to say goodbye." "The same way you did before," Pierce said gently. "You survive, you grieve, and eventually you find joy again. You have done it once, Delilah. You can do it again." "But I do not want to," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "I do not want to lose you. I want 20 more years. I want 50 more years. I want forever." "You have forever," Pierce said. "Love does not end with death, Delilah. You taught me that. You loved Thomas even after he was gone, and I will love you from whatever comes next. Our love is bigger than death." Pierce died on a clear September morning, with Delilah holding his hand and their children gathered around. His last words were, "I love you," and Delilah had whispered them back through her tears. The grief was terrible, a physical pain that threatened to overwhelm her. But this time, Delilah did not try to wall herself off from it. She let herself feel everything, cry everything, mourn everything. And she was not alone. Her children surrounded her with love and support. Her grandchildren brought light into her dark days. And the memories she and Pierce had built together sustained her. It was different than when Thomas had died. Delilah was older now, and she had lived a full life with Pierce. They had had 20 wonderful years together, had built a family and a legacy. There was grief, yes, but there was also gratitude for all they had shared. In the months after Pierce's death, Delilah found herself thinking often about that first meeting on the ice. She had been so certain she could never love again, so convinced her heart was broken beyond repair. But Pierce had seen through her fear to the truth beneath. He had known, before she did, that her heart was capable of healing, of loving, of opening again, and he had proven her wrong with just one touch. That first kiss at the Overlook had shattered all her carefully constructed defenses and shown her that love was possible, that joy was possible, that life was still worth living. It had been the turning point, the moment when everything changed. Delilah lived for another 5 years after Pierce's death. She spent her time with her children and grandchildren, sewed beautiful things for the people she loved, and tended Pierce's grave with flowers every week. She was lonely sometimes, but she was not broken. She had survived loss twice now, and while it never got easier, she knew she could endure. When Delilah died peacefully in her sleep in 1903, she was 70 years old. She was buried beside Pierce, with Thomas's grave just a short distance away. Her children gathered to mourn her, but they also celebrated her life, the courage she had shown, the love she had given. The ranch continued to prosper under their children's care, and the Nathanson name became synonymous with quality horses and honest dealing. Pierce and Delilah's grandchildren grew up hearing stories about their grandparents' great love, about how Delilah had thought she could never love again, and how Pierce had proven her wrong. The story became a family legend, passed down through generations. Great-grandchildren who never knew Pierce or Delilah still heard about that first touch, that kiss at the Overlook, the moment when everything changed. They learned about courage in the face of loss, about the resilience of the human heart, about the transformative power of love. And in Walla Walla, People still sometimes spoke of the widow who married the cowboy, of the beautiful love story that had unfolded in their midst. It became a reminder that it is never too late to open your heart, never too late to try again, never too late to find love. Delilah had been certain she could never love again. She had built walls around her heart and convinced herself they were impenetrable. But Pierce Nathanson had seen through those walls to the woman beneath. He had been patient and persistent, gentle and strong. And with just one touch, one perfect kiss, he had proven her wrong in the most beautiful way possible. Their love story was not about forgetting the past or replacing what was lost. It was about healing, about courage, about the incredible capacity of the human heart to love again, even after devastating loss. It was about choosing life over safety, joy over fear, love over loneliness. And in the end, that was the legacy Pierce and Delilah left behind. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to make all things new. They had shown that broken hearts could mend, that closed doors could open, that even in the deepest grief, hope could take root and grow. Their story lived on in the hearts of all who knew them, a reminder that love is always worth the risk, that opening your heart is always braver than closing it, and that sometimes, just sometimes, one touch can change everything. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of a cowboy who believed in love and a widow who learned to believe again. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Pierce and Delilah were together again, their love transcending even death, eternal and unbreakable. They had proven that love could survive anything, even loss, even fear, even the grave itself. And that was the greatest legacy of all.